In a quiet town where life felt safe, a single explosion turned everything upside down. Homes shattered, streets vanished under smoke, and one family was suddenly trapped between fear, hope, and the fight to survive. This is the story of a father, a mother, and two children who faced the unimaginable and refused to let it break them. Millfield was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone. Kids ran barefoot through the streets, neighbors stopped by for tea, and life felt simple, maybe too simple. The Harrisons were just another family in this quiet place. David worked. At the local factory, Emily stayed busy with the house and the kids, Sarah and Ethan, who were always finding trouble in the best possible ways. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and safe. That morning, David kissed Emily goodbye, promising he'd be home by dinner. The sun was shining, and the air had that crisp October bite that hinted winter was coming. Emily waved, thinking about the breakfast she'd make and the laundry waiting for her. She had no idea that by nightfall, nothing would feel safe anymore. Around mid-morning, everything changed. A deafening explosion tore through the air at the chemical plant on the edge of town. Smoke and fire shot into the sky. Sirens screamed. People ran in every direction, unsure what to do first. David was just a mile away and felt the ground shake beneath him. Emily grabbed the kids, their little hands trembling in hers, and tried to stay calm, even though her chest felt like it was about to burst. Roads were blocked. The air smelled wrong, and the town that had always felt safe now seemed like a trap. Emily debated running to find David, but every instinct screamed danger. Hours passed. Every siren, every shout, every rumble of smoke made her heart pound harder. She had no idea where David was, or if he was alive. Meanwhile, David was trapped, behind rubble near the factory. Injured, bleeding, but alive. He could hear people calling for help somewhere in the distance, but no one could reach him yet. Each second felt endless. He kept thinking about his family, Emily, Sarah, Ethan. He promised himself he'd survive, no matter what it took, because he had to see them again. That day, Millfield wasn't just a town anymore. It became a test of courage, of hope, and of the small but stubborn strength that can keep someone moving, even when the world seems determined to stop them. David's world had shrunk to a space no bigger than a room, but it was made of jagged metal and broken concrete. Dust coated his skin, and the metallic tang of blood filled his mouth. He tried to move, but pain shot through his leg like fire. Panic threatened to take over, but he forced himself to breathe. Think. Just think, he told himself. You have to get out. You have to see them again. The sounds around him were terrifying. The groans of other trapped workers echoed faintly through the debris. Every shifting piece of rubble could mean life or death. David closed his eyes, trying to block out the chaos, imagining instead Emily's smile, Sarah's laugh, Ethan's mischievous grin. He clung to those images as if they were life rafts. Back home, Emily faced her own nightmare. Smoke hung in the sky like a warning, thick and choking, and the air outside was toxic. Neighbors were fleeing, some screaming, some frozen in disbelief. Emily had tried calling David, but the phone lines were jammed. Her mind raced, thinking through every possible scenario. Should they try to leave now? Wait for rescue? What if David wasn't okay? Sarah tugged at her sleeve. Mom, is Dad okay? Her voice was small, almost a whisper, but it cut through Emily like a knife. She hugged her daughter tightly, trying to swallow back the fear. We don't know yet, honey. But we'll be okay. We have to be okay. Emily glanced at Ethan, who was crouched under the table, clinging to his toy truck as though it could protect him. She realized that she had to be strong, not just for herself, but for them. Panic wouldn't help. She had to think clearly, even when every instinct screamed to run blindly into the chaos. Hours passed. David listened to distant shouts and realized rescue teams were finally arriving. He could hear the faint sound of tools chipping away at debris. Every second felt like an eternity, but he forced himself to remain still, conserving energy, even as pain gnawed at him. His thoughts drifted to Emily again. "Please, hold on. Please don't panic. I'll see you soon." Emily, meanwhile, had made a decision. She grabbed what little supplies she could carry, water, blankets, and some food, and led the children toward the makeshift shelter at the edge of town. Smoke stung their eyes and the streets were chaos, but she didn't let fear paralyze her. Every step was measured, every decision critical. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting David to appear out of the haze, half expecting disaster to strike again. That day, time lost all meaning. Hours stretched like days, and each heartbeat felt monumental. But amid the fear, a stubborn spark of hope remained. Hope that David would survive. Hope that the family would find each. Other again, hope that Millfield's nightmare could somehow end. David's world was silent except for the occasional crack of shifting debris and distant shouts of rescuers. Every sound sent a jolt through his body, but he welcomed it. Proof that someone was out there. Proof that he wasn't alone. He tried to shift slightly, testing his strength. Pain flared in his leg, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself to inch forward, little by little. Survival was a stubborn, exhausting effort, but he refused to give in. Meanwhile, outside, the town was a haze of smoke, sirens, and frantic movement. Emily and the children trudged toward the shelter, surrounded by strangers who were just as scared and exhausted as they were. But in Emily's mind, there was only one thing: finding David. Every face they passed, every group they saw, she scanned desperately for him, ignoring everything else. "He has to be alive," she whispered repeatedly, almost as if saying, "It enough could make it real." Hours passed with no sign of him. Emily kept the children close, shielding them from the chaos, but the fear in their eyes mirrored her own. She clutched Sarah's hand and lifted Ethan onto her hip. Each step felt heavier than the last, her legs trembling from exhaustion and worry. The once familiar streets of Millfield now seemed unrecognizable, filled with debris and smoke, a town caught between normal life and catastrophe. Inside the rubble, David could hear faint voices calling his name. He responded with weak shouts, hoping they could hear him. The voices grew closer, and then a glimmer of hope. A hand reached through the debris, grasping his arm. Tears stung his eyes as rescuers pulled him out, brick by brick, inch by inch. His body ached in ways he had never imagined, but the first thing he thought about was Emily and the kids. "I have to get back to them. I have to." At the shelter, Emily's heart leapt when she saw rescuers carrying injured people toward the medical tents. She pushed through the crowd, anxiety choking her throat, until finally she saw him, David, dirty, bruised, but alive. The children ran to him, shouting his name, and he gathered them into a trembling, exhausted hug. The world narrowed to that single moment. Family together, still fighting. But survival wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Millfield had changed forever, and the Harrisons knew they would never see life the same way again. The explosion had taken everything from the town, yet it had also shown something powerful: the unbreakable bonds of family, the strength of human will, and the courage to face the unimaginable. Even as the town smoldered and sirens wailed, David and Emily clung to each other and their children, silently promising, "We survived. We'll rebuild. Together." The days after the explosion were a blur. Millfield was unrecognizable. Streets were cracked and blackened, homes damaged, and the chemical plant, once a symbol of steady work for so many, was now a smoldering ruin. The town's rhythm, once predictable and comforting, had been replaced by chaos, uncertainty, and the slow, painstaking process of rebuilding. For the Harrisons, the relief of being together came hand in hand with exhaustion. David's injuries meant weeks of hospital, care, and physical therapy. Emily had to navigate the stress of caring for the children, managing paperwork for insurance, and helping neighbors who were struggling just as much. Even small tasks felt monumental: cooking a meal, making sure the kids had clothes, walking through the streets without panicking at every jagged piece of debris. These were victories in themselves. But amid the struggles, there were moments of unexpected humanity. Neighbors shared meals and offered what little they had. Volunteers arrived with blankets, food, and medical supplies. Stories of heroism circulated. Firefighters who had risked their lives to pull people from the rubble. Strangers who had shielded children from falling debris. Millfield had been broken, yes, but it was also alive in a way it hadn't been before. Community had become more than a word. It was tangible, felt in hugs, shared tears, and collective determination. The Harrisons, children Sarah and Ethan, began to understand the fragility of life in ways too heavy for their ages. Sarah would sometimes sit quietly, staring at the sky, whispering that she was thankful for every moment with her family. Ethan, once full of restless energy, became more cautious but also more caring, noticing small acts of kindness and wanting to help wherever he could. David and Emily watched these changes with a mixture of pride and heartbreak, realizing that trauma leaves marks, but it also teaches lessons in resilience and gratitude. Rebuilding their home was slow. Walls had to be repaired, furniture replaced, memories salvaged from the wreckage. Every hammer strike and paintbrush stroke felt like reclaiming something lost. Not just the house, but their sense of normalcy, their faith in life continuing despite everything. David often worked late. Emily by his side, both exhausted yet determined. Together, they were repairing more than bricks and mortar. They were repairing hope. By the time winter rolled in, Millfield had taken on a new face. The streets were still scarred, but life was returning. People smiled cautiously, helped one another, and looked to the future with tentative optimism. For the Harrisons, every sunrise felt like a gift. They had survived terror, felt the sting of helplessness, and emerged stronger, together, unbroken, and ready to face whatever came next. Spring came slowly to Millfield, bringing with it the faint promise of renewal. The streets, once choked with debris and fear, were gradually clearing. Flowers sprouted through cracked pavement, and the distant laughter of children returned to the town like a soft, healing melody. Life wasn't exactly how it had been before, but life was back, and that was enough. For the Harrisons, the trauma of the explosion was never far from their minds, but its shadow had begun to fade. David could walk without wincing, and Emily's nights were less haunted by worry. The children's laughter returned, full and uninhibited, though it carried a depth that only those who have faced fear can understand. Each day, the family found themselves grateful for the smallest things: a warm meal, a sunny morning, the sound of someone knocking on the door to check if they were okay. They often sat together in the evenings, recounting the events that had nearly torn them apart, not to dwell on pain, but to honor the strength it took to survive. David would tell Sarah and Ethan how brave they had been, while Emily reminded them how courage often shows itself in quiet, unremarkable moments, holding hands, helping a neighbor, refusing to give in to fear. The children listened intently, realizing that heroism wasn't just about dramatic rescues, but about resilience, compassion, and love. Millfield itself had changed, too. The community had grown closer, bound by shared loss and recovery. People rebuilt homes, businesses, and lives, often working side by side with neighbors they had barely known before the disaster. Strangers had become friends. Friends had become family, and in the process, the town discovered a strength it didn't know it had. The explosion had taken much, but it had also given a deeper sense of connection and purpose. The Harrisons knew that scars, both visible and invisible, would remain. But they also knew something else. No disaster, no matter how sudden or terrifying, could destroy the bonds that held them together. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and the fragility of life, and they had survived, stronger, wiser, and more grateful than ever. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting golden light across their rebuilt home, David took Emily's hand and looked at his children playing in the yard. He felt a quiet pride and peace he hadn't known before. The past would always be a part of them, but the future, uncertain, fragile, and beautiful, was theirs to shape. And for the Harrisons, that was more than enough. The smoke has cleared, the streets are slowly rebuilding, and life in Millfield is finding its rhythm again. But for the Harrisons, and for everyone who lived through that day, nothing will ever be quite the same. They learned what truly matters: family, courage, and the quiet strength to keep moving forward even when the world falls apart. Their story is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope survives, love endures, and life, fragile yet unbreakable, continues.